Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to the longest running superhero role playing game on Earth. And as always, I'm your host, the Game Master. And today we're finishing up part three out of three of our games inspired by the Golden Age miniseries by James Robinson and Paul Smith. But before we get into that, remember to smash the like button, check and see if you're still subscribed because YouTube loves to unsubscribe people. Ring the bell so you know when I upload more stuff. And as always, leave a comment because that really helps us out on our end. With all that said, let's dive into the adventure. The prologue to today's story takes place in the American Southwest, where Daniel Dunbar, also known as Dan the Dynamite, is sealed in a metal canister. He's at ground zero for an atomic explosion. Tex Thompson watches alongside a group of German scientists that were brought to America via a secret project called Operation Paperclip. The scientists look at their instruments and say vitals look good. Just then, the metal canister is unscrewed from the inside and Dan Dunbar steps out. No longer Dan the Dynamite, but now he has the strength of 1,000 men, invulnerability, flight, and his fists have the percussive force of an atomic bomb. The young man with the glint of sun in his eyes and in his smile, this amazing being who sprang from the ashes of the atomic test and into America's hearts, but only because they have no idea that Dan's brain was replaced with the brain of a certain evil German dictator, and he is well on his way to ruling the world. Which brings us to the main plot of today's game. The year began with Senator Tex Thompson's vision of a politically correct superhero spread nationwide, heard of in countless speeches, and seen on countless billboards. Liberty Bell is offered her own televised talk show, but she finds her mind wandering back to her ex husband. Our man works on the Miraculo formula and finally fixes it, so he feels whole again. Johnny Quick edits his film that he's been obsessing about for years now. The Tarantula writes his book, and Starman builds a newer, better cosmic rod. The Manhunter, Paul Kirk, is continued to be plagued by nightmares, and Robot Man continues to terminate Tex Thompson's political enemies. Tex Thompson and Joan Dale, the heroine formerly known as Miss America, begin dating. Thompson thinks she makes him look good, but he hates it when she touches him. Joan wonders why, so she steals his diary and takes it to the Golden Age huntress, Paula Brooks, who opens the lock, and together they find out everything. That Tex Thompson's brain was thrown away and replaced with the brain of a notorious supervillain named the Ultra Humanite, while Dan Dunbar's brain was replaced with the brain of the most evil man of the 20th century. And now that man is Dynaman, one of the most powerful men of the 20th century. So all of the superheroes go to Washington, D.C. And Black Canary runs into Johnny Quick and tells him that she's going to marry Larry Lance. But they're interrupted when Joan Dale, Miss America, takes the podium and suddenly warns everyone assembled there that the Ultra Humanite's brain is in Tex Thompson's body. Robot Man tries to kill Joan before she can say one more word. And with that, we roll initiative. Robot Man goes on 25, so he tries to punch Joan with his extendable arms. So it's his dex of 7 versus her dexterity of 6. That means he needs a 9 or better to hit, but he rolls a 5 and a 3. As his fist strikes the podium, destroying it, Miss America dives out of the way. Our man tackles Robot Man, and it's Our Man's dex of 6 versus Robot Man's dex of 7. So Our Man needs a 13 or better. He rolls a 5 and an 8. Then it's Our Man's strength of 9 versus Robot Man's body of 10. So that means that Our Man does 2 points of damage. And he yells, "Robot Man, it's Thompson. He's the enemy. Don't you see?" Joan yells that Dynaman is the German dictator, the most evil man of the century. And Dynaman, who she's talking about, yells enough and flies at her, bringing down one of those fists of his so that he can hit her with the force of the atomic bomb. But one hero was holding action this whole time. He was just in the crowd in his street clothes, waiting on this moment. So on his turn, he gets between them, and Dynaman's fist is stopped by Superman Red, who had been forced to retire by Tex Thompson, who claimed that the red stood for communism. As Superman Red goes toe-to-toe with the superpowered Fuhrer, he says, "Deja vu. Haven't we done this already?" Dynaman growls and punches Superman Red with his strength of 32 APs, which, by the way, we based on the stats of the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile from page 123 of the 3rd edition DC Heroes RPG. Anyways, so without a column shift, his strength of 32 can't actually hurt Superman Red's body of 40. Superman Red, I'm going to cuss a little bit, so if you don't like it, just skip ahead 10 seconds. Superman Red refers to the Fuhrer as a subhuman piece of shit for killing poor kid like Dan Dunbar. And since the villain's famous thing is that he thinks he's superior, this really ticks him off. Then Big Red gives him an uppercut. He rolls a 5 and a 10, doing 20 points of damage. But what's also important here is the knockback damage. So that is Superman Red's strength versus the villain's weight and APs, right? So literally this punch puts the villain in orbit and away from all of the street level superheroes below. Superman Red then flies up, and away from the weaker supers that he doesn't want Dynaman to kill. And the ironic thing is that since Big Red spent so much time fighting overseas away from the press, most of the people here didn't even know there was a Superman Red. At any rate, so Red flies up to where Dynaman is, and by the time he gets there, he's out of actions. So it's Dynaman's turn now. The villain rolls a 1 and a 3, which misses Big Red. Then he goes again, and he rolls double 5s, which is a critical success. Then he rolls a 5 and a 9, so his grand total is 24. And that means that Superman Red actually takes 14 points of damage from that atomic punch. So Superman Red also takes knockback damage, which I explained a little bit ago there. And it drives him down towards the earth, right? So he's like burning up on re-entry. It's burning off his costume, stuff like that. So on his turn, he has to fly back up to where the Fuhrer is, which is one of his automatic actions. And then he punches him, and now the hero gets a critical success, which this time was double 7s, which means he gets to roll again. And on the second roll, he gets a 9 and a 6. So you add all that up, and it's 29. So that's 6 column shifts, which is really good. So the Fuhrer takes another 34 points of damage, dropping his body to negative 22. 0 is where you are knocked out, right? And the negative version of whatever your body normally is death. So I'll use Superman as an example. Superman has a body of 40. So to kill Superman, you would have to take him down to -40, right? So even though he's not dead yet, the fact that he's knocked out means the Fuhrer doesn't get to go this turn. So Superman Red, when it comes back to him, he goes again. And this time he rolls a 7 and a 6, which does another 20 points of damage. So that kills him. That finally kills the Fuhrer. And there was this interesting moment in the game where, up until now, Superman Red, who tends to be impetuous and he kind of looks before he leaps and so on and so forth, all he was thinking about was anger, right? But as soon as it's done, he feels bad because what he sees before him floating here in the silence of space is this poor kid that they did this to. You know what I mean? He's not thinking about the brain in there. He's thinking about the body, and he feels guilty for having to punch this body. And he feels bad for Dan the Dynamite, who didn't deserve this fate. So, then we get to the epilogue of this game. Johnny Quick's movie is finally finished, and it documents everything that happened to the Justice Society, right down to the end here with the brain transplants and all of that. But the government steps in and confiscates it, sealing it away in a vault. But Johnny Quick and Liberty Bell are trying to make it work again. So for Johnny, even though he has been obsessing over this movie like ever since World War II ended, he will happily give up the movie if it means he could have his ex-wife back. And as for Tex Thompson, now that he's out of the picture, Joe McCarthy takes his place as the most visible public face in the United States. Cold War tensions fueled fear of widespread communist subversion, and McCarthy genuinely believed that numerous communist sympathizers had infiltrated the United States universities, the film industry, and the superhero community. A special inquest convened, and the JSA appears before the House of Un-American Activities Commission. And after a lengthy hearing, the committee members demand that the JSA members reveal their secret identities to the general public. The Spectre, in a showy display of power, vehemently argued on behalf of his colleagues, citing that without their secret identities, they would become targets for enemy agents across the globe. So, unwilling to reveal their true faces, the Justice Society of America instead disbands. So, once again, Superman Red hangs up his cape, and history forgets that he ever existed. Other superheroes retire as well, like Bob and Helen Parr, better known as Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl. For many, the good old days of punching villains has come to an end, and it's time to start changing diapers instead. There's a big baby boom around 1950, and many of the children of the Golden Age superheroes grow up to be heroes in their own right, like Dash and Violet Parr, who were adult heroes in the 1980s. Thor and Sif have a daughter named Torun, and perhaps most famously, Clark Kent Jr. takes over for his dad as the new Superman after the big crisis in the mid 1980s. But that's a story for another day. And that was it for this adventure. This was based on the Golden Age miniseries by writer James Robinson and artist Paul Smith. Unfortunately, in our game, the Golden Age Green Lantern had died in another adventure, and in the comic book, he played a really major role, and sadly, that was completely lost in our game. And in turn, we have Superman Red as one of our original characters that we've created for the game, and the comic book didn't have that. Also, in the comic, Miss America dies, while in our game, she lives. So while we were inspired by the comic, players have free will, and often what you end up with can be very different than how it goes on the page. I have a friend who has ran many games over the years set in our game world, and he is very OCD when it comes to continuity. So when the player does something that's not how it went in the comic, he gets sort of upset, and he overrules what the player did to get things back on track, which, in my humble opinion, defeats the entire point of gaming. When I bought the DC Heroes RPG all the way back in 1985, the blurb on the box said, quote unquote, be part of the legend, which to me suggests I have input into the continuity of the game world. And that is the core concept of a superhero role playing game. So any game where it goes exactly like the comic, to me, goes against what role playing games are all about. Anyways, so you can tell who the GM of each game session is based on how far we spiral out into left field. when, I, when I run games, we are for sure going to end up in left field, which I enjoy. Speaking of which, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If so, smash the like button, make sure you're subscribed, ring the bell for notifications, and leave us a comment because that really helps out with the YouTube algorithm. From all of us here at the longest running superhero role playing game on earth, we hope that all of you have a great rest of the week, and we will see you in the next adventure. Bye.